I love this article because it talks about something very interesting, which I noticed in Romania as well. According to a recent poll, there are many people who actually miss communism. And believe it or not, it's not necessarily based on age. In other words, you would expect that the elderly people who lived through communism would reject it, while the younger people who didn't would embrace it. But in reality, it doesn't seem that age is necessarily something to do with anything. There are elderly people who like it and dislike it. There's young people who like it and dislike it. So you have this very interesting thing. And as you look towards Moscow, you get to see something more shocking. The fact that there are people who actually like Stalin. Now, according to this, it's not a staggering amount. 1,000 people from the entire Soviet Union gathering in Moscow in order to commemorate the 17th anniversary of his death is not such a big number. Also, there are many people who do not commemorate Stalin due to communism, but due to the fact that, well, he managed to get the Soviet Union through the war, and he came out victorious. Although, you kind of point out the fact that he couldn't have done it without help from the United States. Many of the machinery and much of the technology that the Soviet Union used during World War II was provided by the US, and there were many American soldiers which also lost their lives as they were attacking from the west as the Russians were coming from the east. Many historians are, talking about this. They're not denying the sacrifice that the Russians have gave in order to help win World War II, but the idea that Stalin himself and without the help from the capitalist nation of the US could have spun the tide of the war is something that many historians are contesting to this day. However, that's not what this video is about. The question is, why are so many people celebrating a dictator? Especially one which had a very strong cult of personality, creating the image of himself much akin to a demigod. And I think it has to do with the fact that when there is a conflict, which right now there is between Russia and Ukraine, many people gravitate towards strongmen, and this is what a lot of quotes taken from the people who were there are actually saying, that without a strong person, we won't survive. Without Stalin's return to Russia, we Russians and other indigenous people of Russia won't survive, says a 74-year-old person. Then there is another one which says the same thing, that people need a person like Stalin. Young people don't know him very well, and the middle generation is divided by half. Now, it's also important to point out that the life that some people had under a dictatorship may have been good. The idea that all of the things that the Soviet Union has done are atrocities is completely false. There is no regime that is either purely good or purely evil. People experience life under a certain regime in different ways. So, for example, if you happen to be in the right place at the right time, like, for example, you were in a city that didn't suffer from starvation, if you were the type of person that enjoys following orders and don't care much about liberty, like you just want to be told what to do so you don't have to take responsibility for your actions, if you are the type of person that was connected with the secret police, if you were an informant, if you like to rat on people, then you may have had a very good life under the Soviet Union. If you are, however, a person that's a free thinker, a person that enjoys liberty, a person that would enjoy creating their own business and having its own technical innovation, or a person that doesn't really like authority, you will definitely have a very bad life under the Soviet Union. And again, it's also related to the right place at the right time. Like, for example, if you happen to be a peasant, which managed to get some land, and now you have the government coming in and saying that it's not your land anymore, and you're actually a kulak, and you're the problem of why the country is going the way it is. Well, regardless of how you feel about things, regardless how much of a communist you are, when the government sends people with guns to take away your shit, it's very easily to dislike the particular system. And this article actually talks about a lady which was persecuted in the Soviet Union. My great-grandmother did not escape repression in 1945 and was imprisoned until Stalin's death, says 25-year-old biotechnologist Tatania Kutsenova. So, in other words, it's usually the people that were the intelligentsia, the smart and the intellectuals that often came into conflict with the Soviet Union. Obviously, people who were associated with the clergy, which at the time were the intelligentsia before the revolution industry, also got persecuted heavily. Very few people know that the women from the clergy got persecuted even harder. Because what the Soviet Union found out, and this was even during the Lenin time, was that if they were to arrest and send the clergy to the gulag, oftentimes the men, so the monks as well as the priests, would re-educate themselves, and they were more willing to work with the government. However, the nuns were less likely to re-educate themselves, and this is why when sent to the gulag, usually the women never returned, because they understood that they pose a much more higher risk of radicalization than the male counterparts. So yeah, the only reason that I'm talking about this is that I find it very interesting. The way that people look back towards atrocities, and they view them with rose-tinted glasses. Like, they remember that, oh, well, during that particular time, life was more stable. This is something that an authoritarian dictatorship does provide. It does provide stability. So even if things are really bad, if they're shit, at least there is a constant stream of shit. You do not experience many changes during your lifetime. Some people like that. Some people definitely do enjoy that. I personally don't. It's not about the stability, but it's the cost, right? And it's the fact that, as I mentioned before, it's a stream of shit. I do not like to be told by the government, by a person that doesn't even know who I am, don't even know my name, but they will tell me how to do, how to think, how to live my life, because they know better. And this is just something that I can't possibly accept. But again, there are other people who not only accept this type of thinking, but they embrace it, like they want it. And take into account that any authoritarian government, no matter how corrupt, no matter how brutal, still has the support of the people. I mean, in the early stages, maybe it doesn't, but even in China right now, for example, or North Korea, I'm willing to bet, the overwhelming amount of people do actively support what the government is doing. Like, remember during the COVID thing, right? Like, a lot of Western states before COVID, they were concerned about Trump bringing fascismus and cracking down on human rights. And then you have the pandemic, which locks people in their homes, shuts down businesses, forces people to show papers when they go to McDonald's, and the waiter comes in, they have to show QR code. Like, a lot of human rights violations, a lot of behaviors you would expect from a fascist regime, definitely not a democratic one. And when people went to protest in Germany and Canada, the crackdown on them was brutal and very swift. But we need to remember that a huge percentage of the population were in support of the government. Because if they weren't, then all these measures would go away overnight. And there were countries where that actually did happen. But in the countries where the crackdowns were the hardest and when the rules were the strictest, the overwhelming majority of population supported them, over 60%. I mean, you can just look at the polls. And you can also see how people voted in the next elections. But anyway, right, so I just found this to be particularly interesting. Let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.